The air in the courtyard of Changgyeonggung Palace is not merely hot, it is heavy. It is the suffocating, wet heat of a Korean July in the year 1762, a humidity that clings to the skin like a second layer of sweat, making the very act of breathing feel like labor. But the silence that has fallen over the royal grounds is even heavier than the air. Hundreds of courtiers, eunuchs and guards stand in perfect, terrified stillness, their silk robes damp against their backs, their eyes fixed on the ground. They dare not look up. They dare not speak. Because in the center of that pristine, sun-drenched courtyard, a tragedy of biblical proportions is unfolding, a horror so intimate and so grotesque that it will stain the soul of the Joseon Dynasty for centuries to come. There is no executioner's block. There is no gleaming silver blade waiting to sever a neck. There is no rope, no poison, no firing squad. Such things are forbidden. The laws of the kingdom are absolute, written in the ancient texts and burned into the minds of every subject. The king cannot spill the blood of his own body. The royal vessel is sacred. To cut the flesh of the crown prince would be to wound the heavens themselves. And yet the king, Yongjo, a man of iron will and cold, Confucian logic, has found a loophole. A way to kill without killing. A way to murder without a weapon. In the center of the dust and the heat sits a wooden box. It is a duiju, a simple, sturdy chest made of thick, reinforced pine, designed for storing rice. It is approximately 4 feet by 4 feet. It is a household object, a mundane thing found in the kitchens of the peasantry and the pantries of the elite. But today, it is a coffin for the living. Inside that cramped, dark space is a man, Crown Prince Sado, the heir to the throne, the son of the king. He has been stripped of his dragon robes, stripped of his dignity, and forced to climb into the darkness. Listen closely, and you can hear it. Not the grand speeches of history, but the visceral sounds of desperation. The heavy wooden lid has been slammed shut. The iron padlock has clicked, sealing the world away. From within the chest, there is a frantic, muffled thumping. It is the sound of fists beating against inches of solid wood. It is the sound of fingernails scratching, tearing, splintering against the grain in a panic that defies language. Imagine the claustrophobia. The box is too small to stand in, too small to lie down in. The prince is curled into a fetal ball, his knees pressed against his chest, his neck bent at an agonizing angle. The darkness is absolute, save for the tiniest slivers of blinding sunlight that might pierce through the cracks in the joinery, taunting him, reminding him of the world he has lost. The heat inside the box begins to rise immediately. It becomes an oven. The air grows stale, thick with the smell of old grain and the rising stench of fear sweat. Outside, the king stands motionless. He does not weep. He does not turn away. He watches the box. He listens to his son screaming for water, screaming for mercy, screaming for his father to remember the love they once shared. But the king's face is a mask of stone. He orders the servants to pile heavy stones on top of the lid, to dampen the noise, to ensure the prisoner cannot break the hinges. He orders mounds of grass to be packed around the base, sealing off the airflow, turning the heat up, suffocating the screams. This is not a quick death. This is a slow, agonizing erasure. For 8 days, the box sits there. On the first day, the screams are rage, furious, entitled, the roar of a tiger trapped in a cage. By the 3rd day, the screams turn to begging. The voice is hoarse, cracked from dehydration. The scratching against the wood becomes slower, weaker. By the 5th day, the courtyard smells. It is the smell of unwashed bodies, of urine and excrement pooling at the bottom of the airtight chest, of flesh beginning to rot while the heart still beats. By the 7th day, there is only a low, rhythmic moaning, a sound of pure madness followed by long stretches of silence. And on the 8th day, when they finally pry the lid open, the silence is permanent. The man inside is no longer a man. He is a twisted husk, starved, dehydrated, and broken by a terror that few human beings have ever experienced. He died in the dark, in a puddle of his own filth, listening to the birds sing in the palace gardens just a few feet away. This was not an assassination by a shadowy enemy. This was a father murdering his son in broad daylight, using the strict rules of etiquette to justify a torture that rivals the deepest circles of hell. How does a family reach this point? How does the bond between a father and son, the most sacred relationship in Confucian philosophy, curdle into such absolute hatred that a rice chest becomes the only solution? We are about to descend into a labyrinth of royal madness, political conspiracy, and a generational trauma so deep it shattered a kingdom. We are going to open the lid of that box and look inside. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and leave a like, not just to help the channel, but because every interaction tells YouTube that stories like this deserve to be told. To understand the box, we must first understand the world that built it. We must strip away the gold leaf and the silk robes of the Joseon court to reveal the rotting foundations underneath. This story is often painted as a simple tale of a mad prince who needed to be put down like a rabid dog. History is written by the victors, and the victors needed Sado to be a monster to justify what they did to him. They said he was insane. They said he was a serial killer. They said he stalked the palace halls with a sword, severing the heads of eunuchs and bringing them to his chambers. And perhaps he was. Perhaps the darkness was always inside him. But madness is rarely born in a vacuum. It is crafted, it is sculpted, day by day, word by word, silence by silence. Before Sado was a monster, he was a child. He was a small, soft-skinned boy with bright eyes, born into a golden cage, carrying the crushing weight of an entire nation's expectations before he could even walk. He was the miracle son, the answer to a king's desperate prayers, and that tragically was his first mistake. The tragedy of Prince Sado does not begin with the rice chest. It begins with a love so intense, so suffocating, and so conditional that it became a weapon. It begins with a father who looked at his infant son and saw not a child, but a mirror he would eventually smash to pieces. To understand the horror of the box, we must first erase the image of the madman. We must wipe away the blood, the screams, and the violence that would come later. We must travel back 27 years earlier to a crisp, bright morning in January 1735. The mood in the palace is not one of fear, but of ecstatic, weeping joy. The winter air, usually biting and cruel in soul, feels miraculous. King Yongzhou, already 41 years old, a dangerous age for a monarch without a viable heir, holds a bundle of silk in his arms. His hands, usually calloused from gripping the brush of statecraft or the hilt of a sword, are trembling. He looks down at the flushed, wrinkled face of a newborn boy. This is Prince Sado. But in this moment, he has no name, only a title, the Hope. Yongzhou had lost his first son years prior. The kingdom was nervous. The court was a viper's nest of factions waiting for the bloodline to fail so they could install their own puppets. And then this child arrived, a drop of rain in a scorching drought. The king, a man known for his austerity, his cold logic, and his terrifying temper, melted. Witnesses say he looked at the boy with a hunger that bordered on obsession. He did not just see a son. He saw his own legacy solidified, his own legitimacy proven, and the boy was perfect. If you look at the records, Sado was not born broken. He was a prodigy. By the age of 2, when most children are stumbling over their own feet and babbling nonsense, Sado was already learning the complex Chinese characters required for royal governance. Picture the scene. A toddler, barely tall enough to reach the low writing desk, his small, chubby hand gripping a brush that seems too large for him. The smell of black pine soot ink fills the room. He draws the character for King. He points to his father. The court gasps in delight. The king beams. It is a golden age. The sun shines warmly on the tiled roofs of the palace, and the future seems secure. But looking back, we can see the shadow of the box even here in the nursery. Because the king's love was not the warm, unconditional embrace of a parent. It was the appraisal of a craftsman looking at a piece of raw clay. He did not love the boy. He loved what the boy could become. And to ensure the clay hardened into the perfect shape, the king made a decision that would doom them both. Almost immediately after his birth, the infant prince was taken from his mother. This was royal protocol, yes, but Yongjo took it to an extreme. He ordered the boy to be raised in the Joseon, a detached palace complex far removed from the bustling, vibrant center of the court. We must visualize this place to understand the loneliness that began to rot Sado's soul. Joseon was not a happy place. It was a place of ghosts. It had belonged to a deceased queen, a woman who had died in sorrow. The buildings were old, drafty, and shadowed by towering pines that blocked out the sun. The air there smelled of stagnant water and old, unburned incense. It was a place of mourning, not a place for a child. Here, the boy grew up surrounded not by family, but by court ladies and eunuchs who held grudges against the king. These servants, the people who dressed him, fed him, and whispered him to sleep, were from a rival political faction. Imagine a 3-year-old child sitting alone on the polished wooden floor of a vast, empty hall. The silence is deafening. The only voices he hears are the hushed, poisonous whispers of his attendants. They tell him stories of violence. They tell him his father is harsh. They feed him a diet of anxiety and martial fantasies, shaping his reality before. As the boy grew into a young man, the silence of the ghost palace was replaced by a noise far more terrifying. The sound of his father's voice. It is a voice that echoes in Sado's nightmares. A baritone of absolute crushing authority. But it is not the volume that destroys the prince, it is the precision. King Yongjo does not merely scold, he dissects, he eviscerates. The passion in this story is not a romance between lovers, but a twisted, obsessive, unrequited love between a son desperate to be seen and a father incapable of seeing anything but flaws. It is a psychological dance of death, performed daily before a silent, trembling audience of courtiers. Imagine the royal lecture hall in the heat of midsummer. The sliding paper doors are open, but the air is still. Sado, now 15, kneels on the hard wooden floor. He is sweating, not from the heat, but from a terror that freezes his lungs. His robes, heavy with embroidery, feel like lead weights, dragging him down. Across from him sits the king. Yongjo is perfectly composed, his face a mask of Confucian serenity, his eyes sharp as needles. The king asks a question about a text. It is a simple question. Sado knows the answer. He has studied until his eyes burned and his fingers cramped. The answer is sitting on the tip of his tongue. But when he opens his mouth to speak, the air in his throat turns to stone. He looks at his father's eyes, those cold, disappointed eyes, and his mind goes blank. A white static fills his head. He stammers, he chokes. The silence that follows stretches for an eternity. Then the king sighs. It is a small sound, but it hits Sado like a physical blow. Yongjo turns to a minister and says, calmly, casually, that the prince is dull, that he is a disappointment, that looking at him is like looking at a clouded mirror. And then the king does something that shreds the last remnants of Sado's sanity. He calls for a basin of water. Right there, in front of the ministers, in front of the scribes recording every movement for history, the king washes his ears. He scrubs them vigorously, the water splashing onto the floor. It is a symbolic gesture, a ritual of purification. He is washing away the filth of his son's words. He is cleansing himself of the very sound of Sado's voice. Imagine the humiliation burning through the prince's chest. It is a fire hotter than the sun. To be told you are wrong is one thing. To be told you are pollution is another. Sado leaves the hall, his legs shaking, his vision blurred with tears he dares not shed. He retreats to his quarters, and this is where the fracture happens. This is where the passion for duty curdles into a passion for escape, and eventually, a passion for blood. The human mind can only endure so much pressure before it seeks a release valve. For Sado, the pressure of the court, the suffocating etiquette, the constant surveillance, the impossible demands of his father, becomes a physical pain. He begins to develop phobias that are manifestations of his trapped soul. The most specific and most tragic is his clothing phobia, or vestiphobia. To get dressed in the morning is to accept his identity as the crown prince. The dragon robe is not just clothing, it is his skin, his duty, his father's expectation, and so the act of getting dressed becomes a battlefield. Picture the scene in the prince's private chambers. It is dawn, the light is grey and weak. A eunuch approaches, holding a robe of blue silk. It is beautiful, expensive, the finest craftsmanship in the kingdom. But to Sado, looking at that robe is like looking at a shroud. He begins to shake. His breath comes in short, ragged gasps. He sees ghosts in the folds of the fabric. He sees the fire of his father's anger stitched into the embroidery. "No," he whispers. The eunuch steps closer, insisting gently. Protocol demands it. "No!" Sado screams. He grabs the robe. The sound of tearing silk rips through the room, a sharp, violent rip. He shreds the garment, tearing it with his teeth, his fingernails, his bare hands. He throws the tatters into the air, breathing heavily, his eyes wild and dilated. But it is not enough. The anxiety is still there, buzzing under his skin like a hive of hornets. He needs a stronger release. He turns to the eunuch. The servant's eyes widen in horror. Sado draws a sword. This is the trigger. The obsession with the clothes becomes an obsession with the ritual of selection. He demands 10, 20, 30 robes be brought to him. He burns them. He piles them up as offerings to invisible gods. And if a servant hands him a robe that looks unlucky, or if the fabric rustles in a way that reminds him of his father's voice, the sword comes down. The first kill is messy, panicked, a burst of red on the polished floor. But the aftermath brings a terrifying sensation to the prince, relief. For the first time in his life, the anxiety stops. The static in his head clears. The sight of blood, the ultimate taboo in the palace, gives him a momentary feeling of control. He has broken the rules. He has shattered the sanctity of the court. And he is still alive. This becomes his addiction. This is the dark passion that takes hold. He cannot stop because the killing is the only thing that quiets the thunder in his mind. He begins to sneak out of the palace at night, escaping the rigid grid of the royal compound for the chaotic, dark alleyways of the city. He sheds the identity of the prince and becomes a phantom. He drinks heavily, consuming jar after jar of strong rice wine until he blacks out. He sleeps with shamans, nuns, commoners, anyone who is not part of the rigid Confucian structure that is strangling him. He builds an underground shrine in the palace grounds, a secret room draped in blinds, smelling of incense and rot. Here, he abandons the teachings of Confucius for the wild, ecstatic rituals of Taoist magic. He wants to summon the thunder god. He wants to become the thunder god. He's terrified of storms, yet obsessed with them, because only a storm has a voice louder than his father's. The tragedy is that Sado knows he is unraveling. In his lucid moments, he writes letters of heartbreaking clarity. He begs for medicine. He begs for understanding. He cries out that his heart is palpitating and that he feels like he is being chased by ghosts. He is not a villain plotting a coup. He is a drowning man clawing at the water, pulling everyone around him down into the depths. But the king does not see a sick boy. He sees a moral failure. He sees a stain that must be scrubbed out. And as the reports of dead eunuchs and severed heads begin to reach Yongzhou's ears, whispered by the enemies of the prince, the king's love does not turn to pity. It turns to a cold, hard resolve. The mirror is broken. It cannot be fixed. It must be discarded. The obsession has reached its peak. Sado is no longer just a disappointment. He is a danger. The father's passion for order is about to collide with the son's passion for chaos, and the result will be the box. The year turns. The calendar flips to the ominous summer of 1762, and the atmosphere in the palace undergoes a physical change. The spring blossoms have rotted on the branch, replaced by the oppressive, suffocating humidity of the approaching monsoon season. The sky above Seoul is a constant bruised purple, heavy with unshed rain. The air is so thick with moisture that the paper doors of the palace swell and stick in their frames, refusing to slide open, trapping the occupants inside with their own secrets. In the corridors, the shadows seem to lengthen, stretching like skeletal fingers across the floorboards. The court is no longer a place of governance. It is a slaughterhouse waiting for the first cut. To understand the inevitable march toward the rice chest, we must look at the faces of the men and women circling Prince Sado. Time has been cruel to King Yongzhou. He is nearly 70 years old now, an ancient age for the time. His face, once sharp and commanding, is now a map of deep, craggy fissures. His skin is thin as parchment, spotted with the brown marks of decay, stretching tight over cheekbones that look like granite ridges. His beard has thinned to wisps of grey smoke, but his eyes remain unchanged. If anything, they are more terrifying. They are roomy and watery, yet they burn with a paranoid, manic intensity. He does not sleep. He paces the halls at night, his cane tapping a rhythmic warning on the stones. Tap, tap, tap. He is a man convinced that he is surrounded by failure, and the vultures are watching him, waiting to feed on his paranoia. The shadows of this story are not just figments of Sado's imagination. They are real, breathing men of the Noron faction, the political rivals who have hated Sado since his birth. They do not attack with swords, they attack with ink. Night after night, in the dim light of private residences, brushes dance across paper. They are compiling a dossier of doom. They document every outburst, every slain eunuch, every drunken rampage. But they twist the narrative. They do not write of a sick man needing a doctor. They write of a traitor preparing a coup. Listen to the sound of their whispers in the tea houses. They lean in close, their breath smelling of rice wine and conspiracy. The prince wears armor under his robes, one whispers. The prince is building a tunnel to the king's chambers, says another. These lies, mixed with the horrific truth of Sado's violence, travel like a virus through the palace walls, reaching the king's ears in fragments designed to trigger his deepest fears. But the darkest shadow, the one that truly seals the lid of the coffin, comes from the most unexpected place. It comes from within the family. It is Lady Yi, Sado's own biological mother. Imagine the level of desperation required for a mother to destroy her own child. Lady Yi is a woman worn down by decades of palace fear. Her face is etched with the exhaustion of survival. She sees her son unraveling. She sees the madness in his eyes, the blood on his hands. But more importantly, she sees her grandson, Sado's son, the future King Yongzhou. She knows the rules of the game. If Sado commits treason, the entire bloodline is corrupted. Her grandson will be executed along with his father. To save the future, she must sacrifice the present. The scene of her betrayal is quiet, intimate, and devastating. It is late evening. The cicadas are screaming in the garden, a wall of noise that masks the conversation inside the king's quarters. Lady Yi enters. She kneels. The silk of her skirt rustles, a sound like dry leaves skittering on a grave. She does not weep. She cannot afford to weep. She looks up at the king, her face a mask of tragic resolve. "The prince is ill beyond hope," she whispers. Her voice trembles, but the words are clear. "He plots against you. He digs an underground room. He brings shamans to curse the throne. If you do not act now, we will all perish." She tells the king that Sado plans to kill him. It is the one trigger that Yongjo cannot ignore. The king listens, his knuckles turning white as he grips the armrest of his throne. The air in the room grows cold, despite the summer heat. The decision crystallizes in his mind. The bond of blood is severed. The father is gone. Only the executioner remains. Meanwhile, Sado is oblivious to the finality of the trap snapping shut. He is lost in his own labyrinth of horror. He retreats further into his underground bunker, a damp earthen chamber he has dug beneath the palace grounds. Smell the air down there, mold, wet dirt, stale sweat, and the metallic tang of old blood. It is a womb of madness. Here, the prince surrounds himself with the only things that make him feel safe: weapons and darkness. He wears clothes of mourning white, preparing for his own death, yet terrified of it. He hallucinates. He sees the faces of the people he has killed floating in the shadows. He screams at the walls, swinging his sword at invisible enemies, slicing through the stagnant air. "Father!" he screams into the dirt. "Look at me!" But the only answer is the dripping of water from the ceiling. Outside, the tension reaches a breaking point. The weather turns violent. Dark, bruising clouds roll over the jagged peaks of the Bukhansan Mountains. Thunder rumbles in the distance, the very sound Sado fears most. It sounds like the judgment of heaven. The servants in the palace move with hurried, jerky motions, their eyes wide with panic. They know something is coming. They can feel it in the electric charge of the air. The courtiers stop whispering. They stand in silence, watching the king's quarters. The royal guards are sharpening their blades, the sound of whetstone on steel hissing through the courtyards. The king has stopped eating. He sits in his chamber, staring at a single candle flame, watching it flicker and dance. He is waiting for the sun to rise on the 4th of July. He is composing the decree. He is searching for the loophole. He cannot use the sword. He cannot use poison. He needs a container. And then his eyes drift to the corner of the room, to a simple wooden chest used for storing rice. It is sturdy. It is thick. It is soundproof. The shadow has found its shape. The nightmare is ready to begin. It is the 4th day of the 7th lunar month. The sun hangs directly overhead, a blinding white disk that bleaches the color from the palace tiles. The heat is no longer just weather. It is a physical weight, pressing down on the shoulders of every man and woman in the courtyard of Changgyeonggung. The air is still. Not a single leaf moves on the ancient ginkgo trees. Nature itself seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the atrocity to begin. Prince Sado arrives. He knows. He can feel the trap closing around him. He is ushered into the courtyard not as a royal heir, but as a criminal. He sees his father seated on the steps of the hall, surrounded by the high ministers, the generals, the scribes. The king is not wearing the benevolent face of a parent. He is wearing the face of a stone idol, immovable and cold. Beside him, on the ground, lies a sword. The command is given. It is spoken softly, which makes it all the more terrifying. "Take your own life." The king demands suicide. It is, in his twisted logic, a mercy. If Sado kills himself, he dies with a shred of honor. If he is executed, he dies a traitor, and his son, the innocent grandson, will be swept away by the political fallout. But Sado cannot do it. He grabs the sword, his hands trembling violently, but the instinct for survival is too strong. He throws the weapon aside. He drops to his knees. Listen to the sound of his desperation. He slams his forehead against the stone pavement. Thud, thud, thud. He does it until the skin breaks, until blood runs down into his eyes, blinding him, mixing with his tears. "Father!" he screams, the word ripping out of his throat raw and bloody. "Father, please, I will change, I will study, I will be good." The king does not blink. He watches the blood pool on the stones with a detached curiosity. "It is too late," he says. Then comes the order that stops the hearts of everyone present. The king points a bony finger to the side of the courtyard. Servants scurry forward, struggling under the weight of a heavy object. They place it in the center of the sun-drenched square. It is the rice chest, the dweju. It is made of thick, reinforced pine, knotted and gnarled. It is roughly 4 feet square. It is absurdly, terrifyingly small. "Get in!" the king commands. Sado freezes. He looks at the box. He looks at his father. The reality of what is happening fractures his mind. This is not a prison cell. This is a tomb. He begins to scramble backward, his boots scraping on the grit. "No," he whimpers. "No, no, no." The guards move in. These are men who have sworn to protect the prince with their lives, now forcing him toward his death. They grab his arms. They strip him of his outer robes. The blue dragon silk, the symbol of his power, is torn away, leaving him in his white undergarments, the color of mourning. He fights them, he kicks, he bites, he claws at the air. But he is one man against an army. They force him to the lip of the chest. He has to curl his body to fit. He bends his knees into his chest, tucking his head down, folding himself like a piece of paper. He is shoved inside, and then the sound that will echo in eternity. The heavy wooden lid slams shut. Boom! Darkness, absolute, suffocating darkness. From the outside, the courtiers watch the lock click. They watch the servants rope the chest, wrapping thick hemp cords around and around, binding it tight like a package. They pile heavy stones on the lid to prevent the prisoner from leveraging it open. Then they pack mounds of earth and grass around the base to cut off the airflow. Inside, the nightmare begins instantly. Imagine the sensory overload. The box is already hot from sitting in the sun. Now, with a human body inside, the temperature spikes. It becomes a kiln. Sado is in pitch blackness. His knees are pressed against the rough wood. He cannot straighten his legs. He cannot lift his head. The air is stale, smelling of old grain and dry dust. Within minutes, the sweat begins to pour off him, soaking his thin clothes, making the wood slippery. He begins to beat on the lid. Thump, thump, thump. "Father, water, just one drop of water!" His voice is muffled, sounding like it is coming from deep underground. Outside, the king orders musicians to play drums, to drown out the screams. But the screams pierce through. They are the primal sounds of a human animal realizing it is trapped. The first night falls. The temperature drops slightly, but the humidity remains. Sado is cramping. His muscles seize up from the unnatural position. He tries to shift, but there is nowhere to go. Splinters of pine dig into his skin. By the third day, the thirst is a demon. His throat is like sandpaper. His tongue swells, filling his mouth until he can barely breathe. He begins to hallucinate. In the velvet darkness, he sees the faces of the eunuchs he killed. They are laughing at him. He sees the thunder god coming to claim him. He scratches at the wood until his fingernails tear back, leaving bloody streaks on the inside of the lid. He licks the condensation off the iron hinges, tasting rust and salt. History tells us he managed to break a small crack in the wood on the 4th day. He stuck his hand out, a desperate, filthy claw, waving in the open air, begging for the guards to pour water over it. The king saw the hand. He did not offer water. He ordered a plank of wood nailed over the crack. The darkness returns, deeper than before. By the sixth day, the box has become a cesspool. The prince has lost control of his bowels. He is sitting in a puddle of his own waste, the ammonia sting burning his eyes and lungs. The smell drifting from the chest is horrific, a stench of rot and misery that makes the guards gag. But they do not move. They stand their post. Inside, the screaming has stopped. Sado no longer has the moisture to scream. He makes low, croaking sounds. He is drinking his own urine to survive. His mind has completely shattered. He is no longer Prince Sado. He is a creature of pain, suspended in a void of heat and stench. He murmurs to his mother. He apologizes to the darkness. On the seventh day, a heavy rain falls. The water drums against the lid of the box. Tap, tap, tap. It is torture. The sound of salvation inches away, separated by a layer of pine he cannot break. The water seeps into the ground, turning the dirt around the box to mud, but not a drop enters. The humidity rises to 100%. The box is a steam room. On the eighth day, the thumping stops. The scratching stops. There is only silence. The king waits a few more hours just to be sure. Then he gives the order. The ropes are cut. The stones are heaved away. The lid is pried open with a groan of warped wood. The smell that escapes hits the courtyard like a physical blow. The guards peer inside. Sado is there. He is curled in the fetal position, his face pressed against the floor of the chest. His white undergarments are brown with filth and blood. His hands are shredded. His eyes are open, staring into the blinding sun that he can no longer see. He has been baked, starved, and suffocated. The crown prince of Joseon, the son of the king, has been reduced to a pile of bones in a box of rice. The nightmare is over for him, but for the witnesses standing in that courtyard, looking down at the twisted remains of a man who was once a god, the nightmare is just beginning. The lid is open. The body is removed. The stench is scrubbed from the courtyard stones with buckets of vinegar and lye. But as the physical traces of Prince Sado are washed away, a darker, more insidious fog begins to settle over the palace. The official narrative is written immediately, the ink barely dry before the funeral rites are concluded. The king decrees that Sado was a monster, a rabid dog that had to be put down for the safety of the nation. The scribes of the Siluk, the royal annals, are ordered to omit the gruesome details, to sanitize the horror into a simple, tragic necessity. But history is a restless ghost. It does not stay in the box. As we stand over the empty space where the chest once sat, we must ask the question that has haunted Korean historians for 260 years. Was Sado truly mad? Or was he the victim of the most elaborate, slow-motion assassination in history? Look closely at the shadows lurking behind the king, the Noron faction. These were men who built their power on the rigid, unyielding interpretation of Neo-Confucianism. Sado was everything they hated. He was open-minded. He was interested in the West. He rejected the stiff formalism of the court. To the Noron elders, Sado wasn't just a bad prince. He was an existential threat. If he became king, their power would evaporate. So did they drive him mad? Consider the psychological torture, the constant surveillance, the whispers fed to his father, the isolation. There are theories, dark and compelling, that suggest Sado was being gaslighted on an industrial scale. Some modern psychiatrists suggest he was drugged, slipped hallucinogens or stimulants in his medicine bowls to induce the very rages that would condemn him. Was the clothing phobia a symptom of insanity, or was it a trauma response to a life where every robe he wore was a target on his back? And then there is the testimony of the one person who saw it all, his wife, Lady Hyegyong. Years later, she would write her memoirs, The Memoirs of Lady Hyegyong. It is a masterpiece of literature soaked in tears and blood. In it, she paints Sado as a tragic, mentally ill figure, confirming the king's narrative. But read between the lines. Look at the context. She was writing to save her son. If she admitted Sado was the victim of a political plot, her son would be the son of a traitor. By admitting he was sick, she garnered sympathy. She sacrificed her husband's memory to ensure her son's survival. It is the ultimate betrayal, born of the ultimate love. But the twist, the true ironclad twist of this story, is not what happened to Sado. It is what happened next. King Yongjo thought he had solved the problem. He thought that by crushing the father, he had purified the bloodline. He raised Sado's son, the young Jongjo, under his own wing. He taught the boy to be the perfect Confucian monarch, to forget the man in the box. He forbade anyone from speaking Sado's name. But the old king underestimated the memory of a child. 14 years after the lid was pried open, King Yongjo finally died. The court held its breath. The Noron faction smiled. They believed they had a puppet on the throne, a young man who would be grateful to them for saving him from his father's madness. On the day of his coronation, King Jongjo stepped into the throne room. The air was thick with the scent of incense and anticipation. Hundreds of ministers, the very men who had whispered against Sado, the very men who had handed the king the rice chest, stood in rows, bowing their heads. Jongjo sat on the throne. He looked out at the sea of silk robes. The silence was absolute. And then he spoke the first sentence of his reign. He did not speak of taxes. He did not speak of laws. He looked them in the eye and dropped a guillotine blade of words. I am the son of Prince Sado. The panic in that room must have been suffocating. In one sentence, he shattered decades of silence. He was telling them, I know what you did. I remember, and I am coming for you. Jongjo did not become a tyrant. He became the greatest king in the history of the late Joseon Dynasty. But his entire reign was a meticulously crafted act of vengeance and redemption. He didn't execute his enemies with a sword, he executed them with success. He built a new city, Suwon, and constructed the magnificent Hwaseong fortress. Visit Suwon today. Touch the cold, grey stone of the fortress walls. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a marvel of engineering, but it is also a tomb. Jongjo moved his father's remains there. He dug Sado up from his shallow, shameful grave and reburied him with the honors of an emperor. Every stone in that fortress is a letter of apology from a son to a father he couldn't save. He visited the tomb frequently, weeping so loudly that his subjects were terrified. The legacy of the rice chest is not just a story of torture. It is a story of the cost of perfection. King Yongjo wanted a perfect son. He squeezed the coal so hard, hoping for a diamond, that he crushed it into dust. But in doing so, he inadvertently created the diamond in the next generation. Jongjo was perfect because he saw the horror of his grandfather's perfectionism. He ruled with compassion because he knew the smell of the box. The tragedy of Prince Sado serves as a dark mirror to our own lives. It asks us terrifying questions about the pressure we place on our children, about the toxicity of expectations, and about how institutions can crush the human soul to maintain order. The box was made of wood, but we build boxes of words, of grades, of social standing, and we lock our loved ones inside them every day. Sado died alone, scratching at the wood, hungry and terrified. But in the end, he won. His bloodline survived. His son became a legend, and the men who put him in the box are remembered only as villains in the story of his martyrdom. So, as the sun sets over the fortress in Suwon, casting long shadows over the tomb of the rice-chest prince, we are left with one final haunting ambiguity. Do you think they were a victim or a villain? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to explore more stories where history's darkest corners are illuminated, where the official story is peeled back to reveal the rotting truth underneath, click the video on your screen right now. The next nightmare is waiting.